We've heard repeal and replace, we've heard repeal and repair, we've heard repeal and delay, we've heard do it immediately, we've heard take your time. In 2015, early 2016, Republicans, you were one of them that voted on this, sent a repeal bill to the White House where it was vetoed. Why not send that same bill back to the White House again and get the repeal done? It seems like it could be done in a week or two.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing an effort to do that. We've already been through the budget resolution to set up the mechanism to get that bill to the White House. As you are fully aware, some of the issues we talked about earlier, the Senate is pretty much overwhelmed with confirmations. Just trying to get time on the Senate calendar is an issue right now, but I think we're ready to send that bill or a similar bill that maybe has some more teeth in it over to the Senate and get it to the White House and get the repeal process started. It took several years for Obamacare to be implemented, and it'll take time to unwind it. You just can't just turn the switch on and off, and one day you've got Obamacare and the next day you don't. Just simply looking at calendars and the way that state governments operate on certain fiscal years, the federal government has their fiscal year. So it's going to take time once you put the repeal legislation in place to actually do all the unwinding, and during that time is when we will be putting better health care policy in place that's more patient-centered, that's going to focus on people being able to get health care that this is between them and their doctor. It's going to give them more options and more market solutions where you can keep your health care when you change jobs, make it transportable, be able to buy health care across state lines. And then you got the whole issue with Medicaid expansion, which was a huge part of Obamacare. And there are plans out there on how we deal with that. I've been working on that as well. And really those are the things that we're focused on right now over on the House side, is how you craft this policy and how you come up with solutions that work so that everybody's a winner with the health care.
It seems like and I'm generalizing here, but there may be like three big factions in the House. You've got the Democrats, who obviously don't want to repeal and replace it. You've got the Freedom Caucus, or maybe some of the more conservative members of the Republican caucus that wants to see something more drastic. And then maybe Speaker Ryan is looking for something that's a little bit more in the middle. Where do you kind of fall in that spectrum of what you want to see done? Do you side with the Freedom Caucus? Are you with Speaker Ryan's plan?
Well, I'm not even sure what the Freedom Caucus is proposing. I know that if we're going to change the law, we've got to get 218 votes in the House. It's got to be something that the Senate will accept, and it's got to be something that the President will sign. So we've got to work together to come up with solutions that work for the American people, and that's really the camp that I fall in, is trying to find a solution that works and one that bends the curve on the enormous spending that we're doing in Washington on health care. We're up to or we're right at $1 trillion of federal money being spent on health care every year, and it keeps increasing at much faster than inflation. So we've got to come up with solutions that work for health care and work for the budget.
Well, that's a great segue to my next topic. You're on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee now. The President wants to do a $1 trillion new infrastructure spending package. At least that's been the talk. You're a budget hawk, a fiscal conservative, so I know you're not going to raise taxes to do this. Where are you going to get $1 trillion for infrastructure? Do you support doing something different?
Yeah, that's another big issue that we're working on. I don't think anybody would deny that we need to do at least maintenance on our infrastructure. In my district in particular, there are a lot of big infrastructure projects that I think would be good for the economy there in the 4th District. When you look at Interstate 69, Interstate 49, you look at the miles of navigable rivers on the Arkansas River and the Ouachita River, and even there's talk of making the Red River navigable up to Texarkana from Shreveport. So there's no end of infrastructure projects that could be done in the 4th District that would be beneficial to my district and the state and the region. But the hang up, as you mentioned, is how do you fund that? So I've been working on that as well. I serve on the Resources Committee. I'm on the Subcommittee on Energy and Minerals. and we're looking at a way to be able to use some of our vast energy and mineral resources on public lands to generate money to fund infrastructure projects. If we look at the infrastructure needs just on federal lands, and we're talking about the Park Service, the Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, we've got over a $20 billion backlog just on infrastructure needs on federal lands. So I think we've got to use a lot of different mechanisms to come up with ways to fund infrastructure. The tax policy that we're looking at could possibly free up money for infrastructure projects. If we see a lot of onshoring of foreign funds, there's talk of doing some public-private partnerships where the government spends part of the money and private organizations come on. Those type projects could be used in some instances, but it's certainly not the cure-all for everything. But in the end, we've got to find a long-term funding solution so that we can maintain and build new infrastructure, which is vitally important to our country. I think it's a function of the federal government because it deals with interstate trade and interstate commerce. So that's another area where I've been doing a lot of work. And if you look at the opportunities we have right now, there's no shortage of me trying to find things to work on during the day here.
Well, you're on the budget. Well, you're on the budget
and most of the night.
Well, you're on the budget committee also. So, kind of, where do you find $1 trillion? Where do you find $100 billion a year? I mean, you've mentioned some things, but you're talking 20 billion here or 5 billion here, but I mean, we're talking trillions of dollars is what the needs are. Where does that money come from? How do you find that for the budget?
Right, and I don't believe the number is $1 trillion in the infrastructure project. I think he's lowered that down. But even if it was $5 billion, we don't necessarily have that money right now. So it's going to come back to prioritizing. We're going to have to look at the part of government that's eating up the most money, and it's in healthcare. That's no secret. If we look at other parts of the budget, there's a shortage in defense spending. There's no end of shortages, and I think the key factor here is we have to have growth in the economy, and that's what fixing health care, that's what getting a good tax policy in place will do. I think it'll release a lot of pent-up potential in our country to grow the economy, and when we see that growth, we'll see more people paying taxes, we'll see more money flowing through the system. And it's going to take a combination of efforts that include growth and prioritizing spending.
Last question for you. Does that involve touching Social Security or any type of Medicare reform?
The healthcare reforms that are on the table right now, I believe, are strictly Obamacare related, which that actually touches all parts of healthcare. If you remember, Obamacare rated several $100 billion from Medicare, which Medicare's got problems right now with funding. The CBO says by 2030, on the current trajectory, we'll have funding issues with Medicare. On Social Security, I've not seen a lot of proposals out there to deal with Social Security, but it's certainly something that's going to have to be addressed because the same CBO report says by 2034, Social Security will be insolvent. So we've got some major obstacles in front of us as far as prioritizing and funding, but I've got faith that as America we'll work that out.
You may have some tough votes ahead of you. Congressman Bruce Westerman, as always, we appreciate your time. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Roby. Good to be here.